We are talking about finance capitalism, financialization, and all these things. And we are talking about the digital industry, digitalization. And it's a huge challenge, actually. Economics today is a huge challenge in terms of understanding what actually is behind these processes, what actually happens. And the reason why it is a huge problem is that actually nothing happens in terms of, not nothing happens, but not much happens in terms of the real processes. We are talking increasingly about abstract value systems that are disjoined from what is called real economy. There are different ways to start thinking about it. One way is to think about the amount of coverage in the money system, in the finance system, in terms of, and I mixed up the terms because there is this permanent disorientation, if you want, money system and finance system. I said money and finance is not the same. When we are talking about finance, we are not talking about money. Of course, money is part of the finance system, but there is a huge difference. And then the question is, how much money is actually in this finance system? And when we get a loan, when we go to the bank and ask for a loan, we can consider the lending policies. Who gets when for what a loan? This is the one side. The other side is, if a bank gives you a loan, do they actually have the money? You go to the bank, you ask for 1 million yuan. Do they actually have the money? And of course it is getting more and more difficult, confused. Today, when you don't get the money as such into your hand. I don't know how long it takes if you want to get 1 million yuan, get all the little pieces of paper. It takes a long time to count it, especially if you don't trust this machine that counts for you. So what is actually happening there, if you get a loan, if you ask for it, if you get it, they put something into the computer, and on the screen something changes, but you don't get money into your hand. And you just trust your banker, the system, or whatsoever. You trust it is there. And you trust, good faith, fiat money, because you know that somebody guarantees for the money. Not the heaven, but the government. And we know in some way we can trust this system, because there's only one instance, one institution that can actually print money. And they guarantee that the money is there. They print money, they do the coinage, minting, and the money is there. Probably everybody has money somewhere in the wallet, in the pocket, or whatever. Not much. Possibly much, I don't know. But this is what we are talking about when it comes to money. And this is what the central bank can issue. They can issue real money. And then we have the different aggregates of this money. When they create money on the one hand for the aggregate M1, and this is the real money. You go to the bank, and this is the money that is there. And then you have M2, M3, the different aggregates. It's kind of there. It's not there now, but it's a matter of time. But we can rely on it. And then we wake up and say, this was a nice dream, but it was not much more than a dream. Because what we have actually when it comes to the banking system, and the banking system is not a money system, but it is very much a finance system. When it comes to it, we have what is called reserve banking system or fractional banking system, which means even M1, the money that we think is there, is not there. I forgot the figure now for China. I looked it up, but I forgot the number. The highest number I found on the internet for one bank was 45%. But this was an absolute outlier. Usually you have a fraction, a reserve. If it is 10%, as it is in the United States of North America with the Fed, it's high. It can be 1%. It is probably in average about 5%. So the real money, we think, is there, is reduced to about 5%. I think in China it's higher. There is a good reason to have it higher. But even then you don't have 100%. Meaning the 100%, you go to the bank and they give you 100%, 100 yuan or 1 million. They don't have it. As I said, this is, for whatever reason, I know this figure from the United States, it's 10%. They give you 10% they have, and 90% they don't have. Because you get 100%, of course. And you think this is real money. But they only give you 10% real money and 90% fake. Fractional reserve. They have the 10% there. That's secure. And the only reason why they can do it is that not everybody wants to have the money they should have. This is why I said it's a dream. So what you have, considering this, you have a shift of the entire economy in terms of the coverage, in terms of the reflection of economic processes, the reflection of reality. Of course, if we go back in history, and this is why I said we can start with from different points. If we go from there now, what we just said, to the real historical process, we have the real economic process of bartering, of exchanging goods against goods. Money is unknown. It's not considered as being relevant. And what you are doing is you have a product, somebody else has a product, and you go to somebody else and say, listen, I have this, I don't want it, I have too much of it, and you have something else, I would like to have it. Can we exchange? Can we barter? Which is, of course, a very complicated process. And this is the confusion. It's so simple. You just go to one person and say, I have this, you have that, just give me one part of yours, I give you another. It's very simple, but it's very complicated if you think it's not about two products, but we are interested in many products, different products. So I go to you, we exchange this and that, then I go to you, we exchange something else, and then I go to you, and we exchange again something else. But I have to go to each of you. It's always nice to meet you, but it's kind of difficult if you look at all the different products I want to exchange. Especially because I may have first to go to you to be able at the end of the day to exchange with you. So it's not only my products, those I have originally, but it is as well the products I get from somebody else to be able then to exchange something with you. So it's, you see already with 4 people, it's kind of complicated process. Not complicated, it's very simple, but it is a long process. So what we have is, on the first level, we have money. Simple money, but this kind of money is money, and what the amount of this money is reflected in the real goods. Meaning I have a value for the product I have, expressed in money, and I have a value of the products you have, again expressed in money. And that makes it very easy to exchange on this kind of abstract level. I do not calculate in terms of concrete products, but I calculate now in terms of an abstract value. And be aware of it, it's getting more and more complicated in terms of thinking. It's no problem for me to think in terms of carrots and computers and cars. But to think about an abstract value of money, the value of the car, the value of the carrot in money is kind of complicated here. And this is why we always calculate, imagine something of, if we hear the price of something, the monetary value, we have some kind of opportunity cost in mind and say, well, if I buy this, it's really expensive. I could buy as well something else for it. So in this way, we don't compare this abstract value, but we tend to say, what is it actually in concrete terms? How often can I go for a nice meal instead of buying a nice shirt? Or the other way around. And then, of course, it is getting more complicated if you deal with this in different countries in terms of different currencies. How much does a coffee cost here and how much does it cost in Vienna? How much does a book cost here and a coffee in Roma? And how can I compare this? Of course, I can compare it with applying the money rule, abstract value, but it doesn't mean anything. It only makes sense to me when I can calculate it in terms of something that is meaningful for me. But still, I have this, and this makes it possible, I have this reflection of real products behind it, real values behind it. Something that is produced, that exists. This money still exists. And now I have this process of money that doesn't exist. A development towards money that doesn't exist. So fractional banking actually means, still on a basic level, the central bank gives money, prints money, mints money, and gives it to the business bank, to the private bank, to those banks. And they say, here's 1 billion. That's the money. That's real money. But under these conditions, you can do the calculations and look at the different reserves necessary. Actually, they have these 1 billion plus 90% in case of 10% minimum reserve. Because they can borrow this money a couple of times. Just on the computer, they put it onto the screen, another time, another time, another time, and what they really have is the 10%. This is somewhere down there in the safe. And they only can do it knowing and hoping that all these people to whom they gave the money won't come on one day and say, can we have the money, please? No. And basically it doesn't work. You can be lucky that you can go to another bank. Of course, it is a complex system, and you borrow the money. Bank A borrows the money from Bank B. It may be possible, but it may be that Bank B says, sorry, we don't have it. We have our reserves there, but that's it. And there's always, or there had been always, this idea of having a security. On the one hand, it is the security by the state, by the central bank in this case, that has to secure that the money that is circulating is actually covered by something. Fiat money. The state basically says, yes, if we issue 1 billion, 1 trillion, or something that is going completely beyond our imagination. It is actually there. It is secured. Then we have another two main issues, especially relevant when it comes to the international system. That is the gold standard, and that is Bretton Woods, or had been Bretton Woods. And the idea behind these two is whatever is there in terms of gold is the limit of creating money. This is the limit. We have to be able to secure the money we issue, the money we print, in terms of gold. And if you have a good relationship to the Queen of England, you can go into the safe, the huge safe of the Bank of England, and you see actually the gold being stored there. I don't know who has time to clean all this gold. But anyway. So it is something that is real in principle. And then you have another system, Bretton Woods, that you actually peg the money, the individual currencies, to the United States dollar. And the idea is, kind of simplified, the United States of Northern America kind of guarantee for this money of the Bretton Woods system. So the money of the United States, or the United States of Northern America, have enough money to guarantee that it is actually there. Now, I don't know really from where it comes, but we can kind of imagine that gold is really valuable. And we can kind of imagine that it's even the most valuable thing. It's more valuable than diamonds, it's more valuable than platinum. I don't know, there's another metal. But if we go back to history, it's amazing that the same function that we consider for gold had been performed by very different products. Salt. Salt is kind of the most amazing thing. Salt functioned once as gold standard. If you go into a shop today, if you want to buy something very cheap, you probably go for salt. It's the cheapest, one of the cheapest items you can buy. It had been, in a way, backing the entire system due to its character, due to its rarity and that. So it's kind of dangerous to rely on gold, to say this in all eternity will be the standard that secures the value of money. The other thing is Bretton Woods, actually, this pegging system. Something that is not widely known, but I think that should be more widely known, because it shows, this shows the real failure of the system. And it was literally that the French government went there and said, we don't trust the system. We just want our money. It was not possible to get it. The United States were not able to pay the French. Meaning, I don't know the amount, but they pretended we guarantee for this and that amount of French francs. And when the French actually came and said, we want the money now, they simply said, we don't have it. As simple as that. So it is this shift in terms of this money system that it is not backed anymore in concrete terms, be it by products, what we have in the barter system, and you can literally exchange your carrots and the car. At that stage it was more likely the horse cart. And you could say you get, I don't know how many carrots if you give me your horse cart. And of course you see immediately the one advantage, additional advantage of money there. You cannot split a horse cart. You can destroy it, but you cannot split it. But you can split money. You cannot get half of a horse cart, but you can get half of the amount of money for the horse cart, which allows as well, I give you now half of the price you asked for. Later, next year, next month, I'll give you the other half, hoping that I get it from somewhere else, from my bank or wherever. Now, what happens, going back to the finance system or the emerging finance system on another level, is first we have goods and goods, products and products. Then we have the money as intermediate stage, still reflecting what is there. And then we have on the next stage the system of reserves, where you have a disjunction between the real money and the finance. There is more fictional money, virtual money in the system than real money. The 10% is real, the 90% is not real. It's a kind of strange thing. How can it happen that it actually emerges or develops to such a state where it's completely getting out of control? Talking about the central banking system and the economic policies, we said there are different goals. And it's not only about finance, but it is as well about, for instance, employment. And you have different goals of policies, and it is about balancing these different interests. Balancing, on the one hand, inflation, with, on the other hand, employment. You want to keep control over inflation, but not on the cost of employment. You want to balance them. It's easy to control one thing only. You would have increasing unemployment, but this is what you should not have. You should consider both as being relevant. Now, there was a policy shift that the global finance system actually said we should not think so much about employment. if we have a strong financial sector, which means as well we emphasize the creation of money, which means as well we emphasize the control of inflation, then the rest will come. So don't look at employment now. In the ideal case, you postpone it and you say it will develop at some stage. If you are very bold, you say we don't worry about this at all. Important is what happens actually in terms of the development of inflation. So this was a policy shift. Emphasize, prioritize inflation. Another policy shift was, referring here to Saskia Sassen, another policy shift was about the deregulation of interest rates. In general, and it is still valid, in general, we have two interest rates. The one is defined by the central bank, and the other is negotiated on the market with your bank. It's kind of market regulation where you as individual negotiate the interest you have to pay for your loan. And of course, we all can forget it. If we go with our little money to the bank and we try to negotiate an interest rate, if you have a very nice person at the counter, they will say, this is a great joke, now let's go on to business. If this person is not so nice, they just ask, no, what is your business here? Don't bother me with anything. This is our interest rate, and this is what you get and what you pay, and nothing else. Now, if you are negotiating about a huge amount of money, the thing may be different. And I'm talking about huge amount of money, something that most of us, or that is going beyond of what most of us consider being a huge amount of money. I'm talking about really huge amount of money. And then it is, of course, a question of what do you do with this money? Are you negotiating in terms of a safe loan for investment? Or is it about something that is problematic in terms of repayment? So, but both interest rates should be closely linked. This is the idea, the basic idea behind this banking system, that the central bank defines an interest rate as a kind of guideline along which all other banks have to go with when they are negotiating their interest rate. This would be a policy thing to talk about the details, but basically what took place was the deregulation of the interest rate, meaning it had been left to the business banks, to the private banks, to negotiate their own interest rate, and they have had a huge leeway getting away from the central bank, from the interest rate of the central bank. Why was this happening? Part of it is that there was not enough money that found place for profitable investment in the real economy. So the only way of profitability was not investing in the productive sector, but investing into this finance system. Getting more money out of finance. If you don't understand it, it's fine. You cannot understand it because it's a virtual process. There's something happening in the economy that does not have a real basis. I don't give you a loan for a house or for a flat, apartment, or a car, or whatsoever. I don't give you a loan to produce something, but I give you the loan because I get profit out of this loan. Not only out of this loan, but I get profit out of selling this loan. It's absurd. It's difficult to understand, but this is what actually happens. I insure you, insurance is another area of finance sector, I insure you not to insure you, but to make money out of the insurance. All these funds, hedge funds and derivatives are mechanisms that are actually distancing something from the real processes. So I like derivatives. Derivatives are somewhat funny. There is something behind it, or there should be something behind it. Real assets, real money, real money worth. But I don't speculate with this real money, but I speculate with a derivative, which is relying on the money that it is really there. It's simply happening in an artificial space of calculation. Because I can do it with your money, and your money, and everybody else's money. And I hope that there is enough security by 90%, 80% or something that covers the loss that I will suffer from in the other areas. There was, when it came to the crisis discussion, always this discussion on rotten apples into the system. You always have something that goes wrong, but that doesn't destroy the entire basket with apples. It's a little bit a problematic assumption, but that was behind it. And this was behind it in terms of inventing more and more instruments and mechanisms of organization that allowed actually exactly this. Making money to generate profit, not from real products, not from real processes of lending, knowing that you can pay back, but just by selling debt of other people. Another development in this context is the internationalization. That this money that you generate in this one country, the profits you make in the one country, is actually invested in another country. this was increasingly the case that in the one country, the money that was generated and invested in other countries, this amount was higher than what actually was produced in the country of origin. It's again a somewhat funny process, and all this goes hand in hand, not least with a huge redistribution of wealth, the concentration of huge amount of wealth in the hands of a few people, of a relatively small group of people, and the difficulty of finding consumption. This is an issue we address here now, that on the one hand it was necessary to develop investment, to develop wealth, and at the same time we have had a huge issue, not everything, but quite a lot was produced for export markets. And the domestic consumption was not keeping pace. So we have the policy shift here now, saying that we need to look more at the investment here, investment plus investment for production of national consumption, of domestic consumption. Which of course is as well a huge challenge then to deal with the distribution and the question of inequality. So this is the kind of challenge we face in economic processes of relinking, if you want, rejoining the different sectors of economy. Meaning not having financial instruments, having financial wealth to such an extent that there is no link at all to both sides. On the one hand, to real production, meaning you should ideally, not ideally, really, you should produce what you pay for. You should not have more money than products. And you have to link this closely as well to the national economy, to the domestic economy, that you cannot simply produce only per export without having anything left for your domestic economy in terms of investment, in terms of consumption. Real processes of producing goods. Goods are not emerging from somewhere, out of heaven or I don't know what. Even if something grows as a product, there are only few products that are really growing and that we can immediately use. But even then, we have to harvest them, which is labor, which is work. And then, of course, we do it in different social relationships. And at the same time, when we look at the real economy, at what happens today, there is less and less space for producing something that is valuable in this sense. That's what I said before. we have more money to be invested than we have requests for money to invest it into productive processes. This is a fundamental change. Before, when I went through these different issues, we found exactly this process of directly exchanging goods or using the money as mediator, as intermediate instance. And this is the change, or one of the changes, that we now have the other way around. Not people asking, I want to invest, I want to produce something, can you give me some money? I repay it, I produce something, and from this product I will repay you tomorrow or in a year's time. But now it's the other way around. I have money. Does anybody want to have this money and produce something with it? I want to invest this money. Of course, I don't want to give it away. I'm a nice person, but donation has its limits. And I want to make profit out of giving it away. But how can I make profit out of it if there is no real production taking place? Now you can say, that's at least what I would say, we are producing so much and we are permanently producing new products. Of course, Apple, again, the Apple 8 is already on the way. We still think about, I may buy an Apple 7, it's the new model. No, it's not. The Apple 8 is apparently somewhere already kind of approaching. And of course, it's not just Apple, it's any kind of phone company coming up with new products, with new gadgets, and then. But you see already there that the decreasing time from one product to another is an expression of not finding ways of real production, of real new products. There are small changes, yes. But the difference between one generation and the next is very small. Probably we don't even mention it in terms of our daily use. And the same is true with many other products. The same is even true if we look at food, where we find more and more food inventions of refining certain products, because the normal production of food is not sufficiently profitable anymore. And of course, part of it is the fact that productivity is increasing tremendously over the years. And this means that there is not enough space anymore to invest money in a profitable way. Now, there are some things standing behind it, and they are standing behind it on very different levels. The one level is the level of the general development in terms of societies. It's about division of labor. And this is linked the moving away from barter economies where I didn't produce, where I produced the entire product and somebody else produced another product. Now I don't produce anything anymore. Whatever we do, normally there is division of labor involved. Adam Smith, the pen, this small little item requiring a huge number of people getting involved to produce it. Then there is this social process and economic process of long chains of interaction. It's international markets. It is something where, if we talk already about economic exchange, if I barter with one of you, that's a direct process. If I have already money involved and I buy from one of you, actually this purchase is part of a long chain of interaction where different people are involved. Then economics, it is about externalization, externalization of cost, of effort. Get certain things out of the way that I don't have to bother, that I don't have to look after the cost. Somebody else does, externalization. Then I created this beautiful term of indirectionalization. Things are getting more and more indirect, meaning in all these previous cases, division of labor, long chains of interaction, externalization, I have one cause or some causes and one effect or some effects. Now what I think is getting more and more important is this process of indirectionalization, that we do not have this cause-effect connections anymore, but we have different causes, different effects, and they can not be clearly made out. What is the cause, or what happens if I do this? There are many other interferences. And this is something that affects, or that has an effect on the final outcome or not. It can have a very indirect effect, but we cannot immediately measure it. And then there is increased and intensified institutionalized socio-individualization. We are all working in certain institutions, and we are not directly socializing or individualizing, being personality, in this direct interaction with other people, but we are part of different institutions, and we are controlled by institutions and controlling them. It reaches from local schools, from our families, to large networks like the World Bank, United Nations, or whatever. If we mention it directly or not, we are part of it. And this regulates and defines definitely as well our personality, how we socialize. And then we have finally increased decoupling in the sense of segmentary independence and reflexive control. It seems to be contradicting previous issues, but it seems only to be the case because we have the development of certain segments, the financial sector, which is independent of the money sector, which is independent of the real economy of production, which is independent of the political system. Of course, it is not completely the case, but there is at least this push towards segments that can apparently at least, or at least for some time, work independent of others. And then you have, as part of, or as background of this in terms of economic discussions about economics, two strands. As I said, the one is about value as a matter of outcome of the process of production, value theories. The other is value is not generated by production, but it is a matter of exchange. Value is created. This is the idea of one school, of group of schools, is created on the market. Beneficial exchange creates value. If I'm good in trading, this creates value. It's not about production. It's not about picking the berries from the bush, but it is being able to selling them. This creates supposedly value. These are the two schools, value theory and theories of marginality, of exchange. And then you see in terms of economic policies, this orientation by Jean-Baptiste Say of it is all about creating supply. If you supply something, if you produce something, there will be automatically a demand following. And of course, we all have examples for this. If there is a new product coming onto the market, we suddenly think, I always wanted to have this thing. Before we didn't even know about it, and then it's on the market, it's affordable, and we think, yeah, that's great. I always wanted to have something like this. So supply creates demand. But what is if goods are supplied and there is no demand? And there are different reasons for it. For instance, people don't have sufficient money. And it's going even a step further, that people will say there won't be any market for it, for something. It is useless to produce computers. It's absolutely useless to produce computers because there won't be a market for computers. Actually, the CEO of IBM said this in the 40s, I think. The market for computers will be about 4 computers for the entire world. Now, don't nail me down on the figures exactly, but this was something he supposedly said. There won't be any market for computers. So why should we produce computers if we can sell 4 computers? No point. So and this is where you find another strand of economics and policies in this area that John Maynard Keynes actually said, no, just support demand. If there is not sufficient demand, be it temporarily, people run out of money or whatsoever, crisis, or there is no market because it doesn't pay to produce something, then we have to create demand. Give money to the people that they can buy products. Or as well, a discussion we find now, well now over the last couple of years, there is no market for environmental protection. So we will kind of create it. We will enhance the demand by, for instance, investment from the state, from the side of the state. And this will actually cause production. This will make people interested in investing in this area because now they see it will be profitable. Then, of course, it is getting complex and it is getting tricky in terms of all the details. But this is a fundamental difference between different ways of thinking in economics. The one, value theory, the other, exchange on the market, marginality of exchange. The one, supply side oriented, the other demand side oriented. The one, laissez-faire, don't interfere, the market will develop itself, there is no intervention necessary. The other suggesting if the state interferes, if the state is active, then it can actually push forward economic development. And then we have to understand, or we have a pattern, an argument against which we can understand actually what this economic process is about. And it is about capital. And it is about capital being profitably invested. That's the large capital, the large C. And as such, you have two forms of capital. As a matter of the invested capital that is fixed and that is circulating. Fixed capital, there is a tiny fraction of this part of capital being transferred into the new product. A machine, switch it on in the morning, switch it off in the evening, you won't see a difference in terms of its value. It's very much the same. Switch on your computer or your tablet or whatsoever in the morning and switch it off in the evening. If you do so or leave it running, there is no difference. And after a week there's an update, it doesn't matter. But after 3 years, you can throw it away because you cannot work with it anymore. All the new applications are not compatible with the old model. Now, I don't know if it's 3 years. It depends, of course, on the machines, on the equipment. In some areas, it's going very fast. In other areas, not. But the important part is, after a while, the value of this equipment is going into the amount of products that have been produced over a certain period of time. So that's C fixed. Then you have the circulating capital, in particular raw material, that is immediately used to produce something. So I don't know, there's probably a machine producing this, and this machine will be used for 3 years, and then there's a certain amount of metal, and this is going immediately into this one thing, and only the one thing. And if I produce another one, I have the same amount of metal going into the second one and the third and the fourth. This is another form, it's circulating capital, and then you have to have not only the machine, not only the material, but as well the variable capital in terms of the worker who produces it. And this is not only the one worker producing this thing, but it is the worker who runs the machine, it is the worker who is working in the entire process, which may include some administrative work and that. And then the idea is, of course, the M, that there should be something happening, additional profit coming out of this process. This is calculated basically as a matter of consisting of 3 elements. The one is reinvestment, and coming back to the machine, you can say actually at some stage this machine is gone and I need a new one. Or I want to enhance production and I buy another machine, a second one. I buy raw material again. The other is equalization payment and compensation. Coming back to money, coming back to this simple process where actually I take up a loan, I have to repay it at some stage. I may be getting a loan for a month, for a year, or for 10 years. Of course, then the interest rate changes. But in any case, I have to repay at some stage this loan, which is exactly this position of equalization or compensation. Then I have, at the final stage, the excess production, meaning I produce more products, more value. I have a larger output than at the beginning. All this adds up to the large C in terms of the total capital. This is much too easy, and to make things more difficult, you have to look at this. And of course, it is not simply to make things more difficult, but it is to understand, in order to understand this process behind it, as a matter of different sectors, different areas where this economic process takes place. And of course I have the individual, that's you and me, and if you have your family, meaning those for whom you are responsible, where this takes place, where you invest something. And this can be very different things. You invest the time to take care of your little brother and sister, or of your elder of your elder. You invest into education. All these things that matter in terms of private, more or less private, production and reproduction of the labor force, of yourself. And it is something with a different scope. You may just have something like this on a piece of paper, or you may have a very advanced computer. Basically, you do the same things with it. You write something, you make your calculations on paper or on the computer. Things like this. You draw something. Well, with this you cannot connect to the internet. It's a little bit of a problem. But there is a different way of getting involved. So it is in one way or another social, but it is on this private level. Then you have the company level, where again, and this is the normal thing we look at in economics, where you have the different forms of capital, the different investments, and the outcome. There we can easily say it is happening in monetary terms. And only, this is at least what we usually do, we only consider the monetary side of it, of investment and the output. Then we have as well the societal level, because every enterprise depends on what is going on in society, or on the societal level, as well in economic terms. The infrastructure. If you compare the different areas, you go to the coast, Shanghai being one of the most famous places for this, you have a well-developed infrastructure with regard to everything. You have different universities, you have streets, you have the metro, you have internet, fast, high-speed internet, and. If you go to a place like ChangSha, you find the same, more or less, but at the same time you don't find it to the same level. ChangSha is a smallish place. It's only the size of a country like Hungary. But still it is, I don't know, I think it's about a third of Shanghai, roughly. And then you would have a place, I don't know where, a remote place where you hardly have a street or road to get from the one house to your neighbor, let alone public transport or metro, let alone internet. Even if you have it on the mobile phone, the network is so weak that it doesn't work. So how can you do business on this advanced scale compared with Shanghai? So this is all part of societal infrastructure. Environmental issues, a finance system, banking system. And it is something that depends on this wide array of public infrastructure. So it is a matter of different resources that you have to put into the calculation, reminding us, of course, of Eleanor Astrin and the different kinds of product or goods, public goods, private goods, not least the common pool resources, where we can freely access something without actually paying for it. All this matters, and it has to be considered that on the societal level, but as well on the different levels of private society, the company level, social level, and societal level, all this matters where we are. Meaning it's not really the matter of society as such, but it is as well on the private level. My private household depends on where I live, meaning on how capital is distributed in my area. So it is not just the macro level where it matters, but as well the micro level. My private household, which is actually one person, is depending on the infrastructure of the area where I live. Your private household, it's the same. If you are working here, going here to university, and your parents live, I don't know, 100 kilometers away, do you have a train connection going there or not? 100 kilometers, no problem to cycle. I can guarantee you it's actually fun. Consider this for the next time. But it matters. All these things matter in terms of, do you have actually companies, do you have supermarkets, or do you have only small shops and. Now we are talking, so far, we are talking about the capital side in terms of the money invested, if you want, the investment into the process of production. But then we have to think as well about the value added, meaning the output. This is the idea of it. We want to invest in order to get something out of this process of value added. Now, value added is something, of course, we usually think about it in terms of money, return. We invest 100 yuan and we want to get at least 100 plus 0.1 more. Well, for this we wouldn't do it, but at least we want to have more out of it. So we have the value added in terms of total output, investment, we produce something, total output, and then we have to consider as well, and we have to deduct this as a matter of what did we invest, meaning loans, interest rate, advanced performance, meaning products we already buy from others or produce in another process. Now, to make sense out of it, in terms of the real cost, we have to go a little bit further. And then we say we are actually interested in more. On the societal level, of course, we have the question still, what does the society produce? And this is the total output. But now it is as well the total output in terms of per capita output. How much is it when I calculate it, recalculate it per person, per capita, per head? For whatever reason, we always think people have a head, and that's per capita is per person. And then we look at the Gini coefficient, which is a way of calculating inequality in a society. We don't have to go into detail here in terms of how it is calculated and if it's really the value, the complete, telling the complete story. But the Gini coefficient is a standard measure, and it is more or less reliable, telling us about the distribution, the equality, the distribution of resources in a society. So you can say, looking at the Gini coefficient allows us to determine the equality or inequality in a society. So you have this formula here, which then, to say in ink, is translated into value added equals total output minus the total expenditure divided or related to the inequality in a society. But what we have here so far is we have two equations, we have two sides. The one is about the capital side, the investment. The other is about the outcome, the output in terms of the value added. What did we gain out of this investment? And this is why we have to come to this nice formula of bringing the different levels together. It's simple, isn't it? So you are looking, of course, at the total, the amount of it. This is the standard economics, capital. Now you relate it to the value added, but in terms of standard, it's only here on the company level. Now we introduce or we include what is happening on the private level. Housework, childcare that is necessary for society. And we look at the public infrastructure. This depends on something that is produced here and that is produced here. No production here without the train or the ship or whatever getting the raw material to the company. And this is a public thing. Go on in this way, and then you relate this in a final stage to the value added, meaning what is more, what is added in relation to the total capital. Of course, it is very easy. It is a very simple calculation. It only looks very complex, and it is complex in terms of looking at the different values. And this is why I said it is difficult when it comes to internationalization and. But we cannot say we produce only in the company and neglect at the same time the social cost and the social contributions. So in this way, we can close the system, of course, having a huge number or the need to put huge numbers into it. But at the end, if you go through it, it is a very simple calculation. The difficulty is only to get the necessary values for it.